Many of your dad's peers are not nearly as healthy as he is. He's obviously an extremely healthy man. He's exercised a lot and he's taken care of himself. Many of his peers would not be that healthy. Many of them would be on multiple medications per day, which are trying to alleviate the symptoms of chronic diseases. And this is normal. Most Australians die because of or an associated result of a chronic disease of some description, and a significant proportion of them have at least one chronic disease.
Did you know your gut could be the key to your mental health? In this episode, I sit down with David Robertson, founder of SuperGut Australia, to discuss the connection between gut health and mental clarity. David has spent years researching how nourishing your gut microbiome can reduce inflammation, improve mood, and enhance overall well-being. He shares his personal journey into gut health, the science behind the gut-brain axis, and why small, sustainable changes can have a major impact on your life. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it, with the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioural science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss how your gut controls your mood and simple ways to improve both. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. David, nice to meet you, mate. Thank you so much for making the time to come on the podcast.
Great to meet you too, Nick. My absolute pleasure. It's going to be fun.
Appreciate it. I'm glad we got there after a bit of back and forth, and good to have the time now to do it. So
we're in the same time zone, so that helped.
I know, the story of my life, coordinating time zones and all sorts of things. And now, ironically, we're actually in the same time zone while we're doing the interview. So there you go.
Exactly.
I'll just jump in. So our audience can learn a little bit more about you. Can you just give a background on yourself and how you came to be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. By way of introduction, my name's David Robinson. My career has been spent in marketing for consumer products and trade products for Australian-based clients. So I have a marketing services business, which is my primary occupation. About 5 years ago, I was literally watching Insight, and Michael Mosley, RIP, was one of the guests on Insight, and he was talking about the gut microbiome. He was talking about inflammatory diseases, and as I was learning about this, I started piecing things together for my own family. So my father, who has recently passed away, unfortunately, was heavily medicated for cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and depression for the last 30 years of his life. My mother had suffered from arthritis, from irritable bowel syndrome, the diarrhea version, which is very unpleasant. And my younger brother, Michael, had been actually subsequently found out misdiagnosed with Crohn's disease. And as Michael Mosley was talking about all of these inflammatory diseases relating to the gut, chronic diseases, I started piecing things together, and I was like, well, my family's got major problems in their gut, potentially. And so from that introduction, what I did was actually I started to try and find one of the things, back up a little bit, one of the treatments that was floated during this TV show was this idea of what's called a fecal transplant. So it's officially fecal microbiota transplant. And basically the way it works is that you take, I don't want to gross your audience out, but we'll go with it and see what their tolerance is. Basically, you take a stool sample from a healthy person and you process it, and then you administer it to an unhealthy person, and it can help to reduce symptoms of inflammatory bowel diseases, helps to repopulate the gut microbiome, and it can have a very positive health benefit. And so as I was hearing about this treatment, I was like, I wonder if there's anyone in Melbourne that does this treatment. So I reached out to a couple of different gastroenterologists through their websites and found one that was prepared to offer the treatment. We then, as we organised the treatment for my parents, and also for my brother. As I mentioned, my dad passed away very, very sadly back in 2020 after suffering from a stroke. But my mum's doing much better with her symptoms as a result of the treatments. And my brother Michael, who was subsequently diagnosed with colitis, is almost symptom-free now. Now, it's not just because of the fecal transplant, but the regime of treatments that was offered by this gastroenterologist was quite novel. Obviously, fecal transplants are quite novel, but he also used, as well as antibiotics, he also used medicinal steroids, but probiotics and prebiotics as part of his treatment regime. And so my brother Michael has responded brilliantly to this treatment, and he's basically symptom free. He still has to be careful about what he eats, but if you've known anyone who has colitis, it's very, very difficult to be symptom free, and it's really quite a terrible condition. It's really debilitating. But for him to be living, even though he has to be careful about what he eats, for him to be living with that without symptoms is really pretty amazing. And it's not that it works for everybody, but what this sort of indicates is that there are novel treatments that can be helpful for inflammatory-based bowel diseases, and that's what we wanted to find out. So I ended up working with this gastroenterologist on a couple of different ideas to make these treatments more widely available. That was always going to be a bit difficult because it's a bit novel and it's a bit gross. It's not for the faint-hearted or for the squeamish, but he was talking about, as part of his treatment regime, he started talking about these things called prebiotics, and we were like, what are these prebiotic things, and what's the point of them? And so, as it was explained, and as we've subsequently found out through our research, prebiotics are the nourishment that you need for the beneficial bacteria that live inside your gut. So your gut, you're effectively, a human being is basically a bacterial sponge. We are covered in bacteria. So there's an estimate that up to 90% of the genetic material that makes up a human being is bacterial.
Wow.
So that's quite a startling thing when you think about it, because we can't see the bacteria, of course, because they're microscopic. But we've got bacteria all over us, up our nostrils, in our ears, everywhere from the start of the gastrointestinal tract to the end, which is down there, we're saturated in bacteria. And many people who think about these things are fascinated by this idea that you've got this ecosystem living on you and inside you. And what science is revealing, medical science particularly, is revealing is that within your gut microbiome specifically, that's the by far the largest concentration of bacteria inside your body. There's hundreds of trillions of bacteria that live literally at the start of your large intestine, where you go from small intestine to large intestine. That's where basically all of these bacteria live. It's right at that early section. The bacterial population is made up of species of bacteria that can provide you with a profound medical benefit. You've got literally the potential for a very, very sophisticated pharmacy just inside your large intestine if you promote the right bacteria. So you've also got bacteria that provide you with no benefit whatsoever. They're basically freeloaders. But you've also got bacteria that also can do you harm. And so what you've got is you've got this ecosystem where there's constant battle between the bacteria that can do you good and the bacteria that can do you harm. And so the prebiotics that our gastroenterologist friend was talking about were the plant fibers and starches which nourish the good bacteria that live inside you. So basically, you're feeding the army of bacteria that can do you good so that they can out-resource the army of bacteria that can do you harm inside your gut. And so in the concept, it really is as simple as that. And so it's effectively a prebiotic is nourishment for good bacteria. When you feed the bacteria, and we can go into this in as much detail as you like, because it's quite fascinating. When you feed the good bacteria, two things happen. Number one, there is an output. from that fermentation process. The bacteria actually ferment the fibers, and there's output from that process. And then by nourishing those bacteria, they multiply. So in other words, if today you've got one Bacteroidetes bacteria and you feed it, tomorrow you'll have two. And then when you feed them, the day after you'll have four. And so you get this fantastic multiplying effect by constantly feeding the right types of bacteria. And then what they're doing when you're feeding them is they are fermenting the fiber, as I mentioned, and they're producing byproducts of that fermentation process, which are effectively the medicines that your body needs to be healthy. And we can talk specifically about that. But yeah, so when the doctor was talking about this sort of stuff, we were like, well, you're treating your patients with probiotics as well as prebiotics. What's the point of the probiotics? And typically, by the time you get to a gastroenterologist, you're pretty unwell. Healthy people don't go see gastroenterologists. And so the people who are visiting the gastro have got an illness of some description. And in many cases, that illness has been brought on or certainly facilitated by what they call dysbiosis of the gut microbiome. So this is where you have an abundance of detrimental bacteria and a deficit of beneficial bacteria in your gut. And so what he would do is he would use probiotics to help build up the population of beneficial bacteria, and then prebiotics to feed them once they got there. Because if you just throw them into the gut, but you don't feed them, then they die. And so there's no point in taking a probiotic without a prebiotic, or changing your diet at least. And so he would use these probiotics and prebiotics as a combination therapy to help build up the gut microbiome so that the gut can start functioning like the pharmaceutical organ that it's designed to be. And so we were like, okay, well, tell us about these prebiotics. Where can you get them? What sort of fibers are they? And he was like, well, this is the list of the fibers that are shown to be beneficial through medical research. And there's lots of universities. Well, there's a number of universities that study these things quite closely. Lots of people are thinking about the gut now, which is amazing. A lot of researchers are looking into the benefits of the outputs of the gut microbiome, the short-chain fatty acids, neurotransmitters, and vitamins. And certain number of universities are looking into how the body can produce them. Those are the ones that we're interested in for our recipes, because what they say is that if you take these fibers, the bacteria in your gut will ferment those fibers and turn them into these different types of metabolites or vitamins or neurotransmitters. And so our thought is, well, if you can have a combination of fibers that are known to provide a benefit by supporting the right types of bacteria, then taking this combination of fibers is going to be good for you.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. Is we've created these products, which are very simply a combination of plant fibers, which are known to provide you with a really profound benefit by feeding your gut microbiome. So 4 years later, we've got 2 products in the market, and we're selling these primarily online, and people are buying them and they're loving them. So that's sort of like, in a nutshell, I suppose, that sort of gives you a bit of an idea as to where we've come from and how we got here. It's a journey where we're motivated by the idea that if you can keep your gut healthy, then you can be a healthier human being for longer. And that we feel like is a really important reason to exist. And it also provides our community with a really profound benefit over time. And so that's our motivation. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, that's the thing. At the end of the day, we need to learn, what are simple measures we can take to look after ourselves on a day-to-day basis to, cover all these, and everything's interlinked, with our mental health, sleep, what you're talking about here.
It's so important.
Pre and probiotics, exercise, everything. So, and people can get overwhelmed. So I think, it's great what you're doing. Like for me, I don't know a huge amount about this area, but it sounds like, if I wanted to take action now that I'm learning from you, it's pretty simple in terms of if I wanted to use your product, that, I've got a simple solution to take rather than having to go through a million different steps and, take 20 different supplements every day. Here's one thing I can do to work away at that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And of course, as you say, there's basically a small number of key pillars for health. Movement is extremely important. So as your muscles are stronger, they provide an anti-inflammatory benefit for your body. Your body heals better. You sleep better. Sleep's incredibly important. Hydration's incredibly important. But the pillar of health that we're thinking about is nutrition. As the US government, Australian government recommend 30 grams of fiber a day. That's not nearly enough, actually. You should be eating 50 plus grams of fiber every day, and a healthy and at least 30% of that fiber. There's two types of fiber. There's soluble fiber and there's insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is really, really important. That's things like oats and bran and the roughage that keeps things moving through the gastrointestinal tract, basically provides bulk for the stool. But the soluble fiber is the plant fibers that the bacteria then ferments and turns into these medicines for the body effectively. And so it's really, really difficult to get that much fiber in a modern diet. Now, if we were cavemen, when we were cavemen, we would be nomadic and we would be walking through the plains of Africa. And I'm not sure, this really fascinating thing you can do if you go to Warrnambool is you can actually walk through Flagstaff Hill with a local Indigenous person. And what they will do is they'll give you a little tour of this. And I did this with my kid when he was in grade 5. I attended the camp. And this local Indigenous man walked us through Flagstaff Hill. And every 2 or 3 meters, he would stop and he would pull something out of the ground or off a tree or off a bush. And he would say, smell this and eat it. And so if we were as we were evolving as human beings, our habits would be to walk through our environment and eat everything that we could get our hands on all the time. So we were constantly eating roughage. We're eating root vegetables. We're eating berries off the tree. If you could find honey, that was the best day of the year. And occasionally you would have a meal that included some meat, but most of your nourishment would be coming from your environment, the things that you would eat as you walked around, or that were gathered and brought back to the tribe, for example. And so primitive humans had huge amounts of fiber in their diets. And so we would be constantly feeding these beneficial bacteria that like fiber, because those are the bacteria that would be getting nourished all the time. And then when we discovered how to refine sugar and mass produce wheat and corn and other crops, the diversity of fiber within our diet started to shrink dramatically. And if you think about it now, even though you're a healthy person, you probably have salads and you probably have vegetables and all those sorts of things. But the amount of salad and vegetable that you'd need to really ensure long-term health is huge. It's almost the only thing that you would eat all day is fruit and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, meat. There's no problem with meat. I eat meat too, but the fact is that in order to be able to get enough fiber to make sure that you can stay healthy, it's really, really difficult, especially with modern food systems. And so we've created our product, and there are others like it in the market. This is not the only one. We've created our product just to make it easier to get more fiber. And it's not the only fiber that you need during the day, but it's a way of getting more. And so we wanted to make that as simple and as palatable as possible. Just make it easy. Just to get a bit more fiber in your diet. You just throw some of this in a shaker and drink it in the morning like I do, and you'll get as much fiber as your bacteria need at least through the diet for that day. And don't get me wrong, there's other supplements that are also extremely beneficial, and they tend to sort of, I'm not sure if you've noticed, I'm sure you have, is that they sort of get interested. A year ago it was all about mushrooms, and now it's all about creatine, and there's this massive push for protein, which I honestly don't really understand. I don't understand taking protein supplements, but there's no one solution that's perfect for everybody, and especially in people who've got stressful lives. We're all extremely busy, and so finding the time and making the time to cook food, to cook balanced meals, is just hard. And so that's why I think these supplements are so attractive, is because they make getting healthier or being healthier a bit easier. And so that's great. I'm all for it, just as long as there's a fiber supplement in there as well. And if it's ours, so much the better. But if it's somebody else's, that's fine too. You just got to get enough fiber in your diet to support your bacteria.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? And people get with what you're talking about there, people get overwhelmed where, like you're saying, there's a different health trend all the time. There's, a million things we should apparently be doing. And to try and do them all, you'd have no time for anything else. And, like you're saying as well, if people wanted to try and eat as much salad and nuts and whatever to get all these nutrients, you can't sustain it. So finding, I think having the attitude of how do I eat as well as I can and then supplement it just simplifies it so much. But it's also getting that education out to people. Like how are we doing in general with the education, and how do we educate people more about these things?
Oh, it's such an important question. So my answer is we're not doing nearly well enough, honestly, to and especially when it comes to long-term health. You have health insurance, and you have a super fund or a 401k if you live in the States.
Yep.
But we're saving for our retirement, and we're paying for health insurance every month in case we get sick. But very few people, other than those that are taking their health very seriously, a lot of people don't really invest in their own health and well-being.
Yeah.
And I think that we should be I think we should be teaching health and well-being at school to primary kids. My kids don't know the first thing about it, other than what I go on about, and their eyes roll and they're like, "Dad's talking about poo again." And and nobody really knows about what it takes to. Well, no, let me restate that. Medical science knows what it takes to make and keep a human being healthy. Medical practice is not there yet. And part of the conundrum for the way our current medical system works, Nick, is that it's like, if you're a typical bloke, how long does it take for you to be feeling sick before you decide you can justify going to the doctor? Weeks. Often
At
weeks,
least, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if something's hurting you, it's like, oh, I've got this really nasty pain in my tummy. It'll go away. And then a week later, it's like, it's still there. And the wife's nagging, go to the doctor. No, it'll be fine. So you might have had it for a month before you go to the doctor. And then and then you need to accurately describe the symptoms of what you're feeling to the doctor to narrow down the choices of the tests they're going to do to figure out what's wrong with you. And then when they run through all this battery of tests, you come back 2 months later or whatever, you're still in pain, or maybe they've given you something to help with the pain. And you go back 2 months later and you're like, oh, I'm not in pain anymore. And they're like, oh, well, the medications are working. That's great. We've got the tests back. Can't see anything wrong. And it's like, well, if the medications are reducing your discomfort, if the discomfort comes back, come back in a couple of months' time or whatever it is. And it's like, all of a sudden, it's like, you've got something potentially seriously wrong with you that you've been ignoring for a period of time, and then it's been misdiagnosed. No fault of anyone else's. This is just the way the system works. And every time you go to the GP, you got 15 minutes. And if they feel like something's serious enough, then they'll refer you to a specialist, and you've got to wait a month to get a specialist appointment. And then you go to the specialist and they say, oh, we're going to do some more tests and try and figure out what's wrong with you. And all it's like months and months and months pass. And that's after you've figured out, that's after you've justified that you can go to the doctor. It's like it's all very reactive.
Yep, exactly.
And what I feel is the future of health is proactive health management. People are talking about personalized health and all that sort of stuff, and it's like, I think that's probably it's a future state, right? And that'll be nice. You'll be able to go to the chemist and you'll do a blood test or some saliva test or whatever, and the machine will tell you that you're deficient in certain types of vitamins or whatever it may be, and then you can take these supplements, blah, blah. All that's going to be good. That's going to be fine. Technology is going to help us with that, right? But the basics are that you've got a human being, and you need to sleep well, you need to exercise well, and you need to eat well so that your body can have sufficient fuel to be able to power itself, but also it has to have the specific types of fuels that it needs to be able to regenerate its cells. And that's where the problem is, okay? So there's this, people think about nutrition, they think about food, they think about calories or kilojoules, and they say, well, I'm an adult male, and so I burn 2,000 calories a day or whatever the number is, I don't know. It's like, okay, So if your diet consists of 2,000 calories, you're thinking, well, I've had enough to eat today, right? But what we think about in terms of energy is we think about like how much fuel do I need to move my muscles for my heart to beat, to be able to pump the blood, for me to be able to breathe, do the exercise that I want to do. How much fuel is required to do all that? And it's like, well, that's a certain amount of fuel, right? And that's because we think about these things so simplistically. It's like, well, that's the petrol in the car, in the engine, to run the engine so the car can drive, right? What we don't think about is how much and what types of fuel are required for the car to rebuild itself.
Yeah.
So when your car has a problem in its engine, your car can rebuild itself, okay? But it needs a certain type of energy to do that. And it's different to the type of energy that the body needs to run. So if you've got, because the energy that your body needs to run passes through your bloodstream and into your muscles, and that charges the muscles, and if I can move my body and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. But the energy that you need to regenerate the cell lining of your large intestine is quite different.
Yeah.
So are you giving yourself enough energy for your body to be able to rebuild itself? And the answer is no. Generally speaking, we are not giving ourselves the right type of energy for the body to repair itself. There's a good way to think about this, actually. So there's one of the most dangerous thing that you can get if you're a female is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's kills more females than any other condition. And there's a version of dementia called vascular dementia. And what that is basically, if you can imagine, so you're going to have to take my word for it, but I heard these stats on the internet. Maybe they're true and maybe they're not, but reputable people were saying. If you'd like to try and, maybe you could try and guess, if you took all of the blood vessels and capillaries out of your brain and lined them up end to end, and you started driving in Melbourne, how far do you think you'd get before you got to the end of that stream of capillaries and blood vessels just in your brain?
I've got no idea. I'll say 10, a kilometre. I don't know.
You get to Sydney.
It doesn't make sense. That's crazy.
So when we think about blood vessels, right? We think about our arteries. You can touch your carotid artery and you can feel your blood pump. It's like that thick, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The vast majority of our circulatory system is microscopic. So if you think about every cell in your brain is fed by blood, oxygenated blood. Some of those capillaries are so small that the blood cell, the little red blood cell, the capillary has to bend for the blood cell to get through it.
Right.
So they're tiny, right? And so that's the whole point. It's like you stretch the big ones out, and maybe the big ones go 500 meters. I don't know. I'm just making this up. But when you get to the really, really tiny ones, they're all through. So that if you took all of the blood vessels from the entire body, apparently you can wrap around the Earth twice. Because that's the way our circulation system works. Most of these capillaries are absolutely microscopic, and so they're really, really tiny. Now, they're also extremely vulnerable. And so if you start to deprive certain parts of if these capillaries get blocked for whatever reason, then you start to deprive oxygen for certain cells. And if those cells happen to be in your brain, then you start to lose brain function. If they're surrounding your heart, you start to lose heart function.
If you're looking to make a change, to lose weight, to get toned, to gain self-confidence, all in just 24 minutes a day, then go no further. You can check out the Move Your Mind community by going to nickbrax.start.page.
And I'm using this as an example of how important it is that your body can rebuild itself, and that it's so important to get the nourishment that your body needs to be able to rebuild itself. And I know this is a sort of we'll pivot this conversation towards the connection between the gut and the brain, because I know that's really important to your audience. The gut and the gut-brain connection is absolutely vital for long-term mental health outcomes. So making sure that your blood gets all the brain, that the brain gets all the blood that it needs, is super crucial. And so, this is especially important as we age, because your body's ability to regenerate itself, at a cellular level, is absolutely essential to the body staying healthy long-term. Because if you can imagine, many of your dad's peers are not nearly as healthy as he is. He's obviously an extremely healthy man. He's exercised a lot and he's taken care of himself. Many of his peers would not be that healthy. Many of them would be on multiple medications per day, which are trying to alleviate the symptoms of chronic diseases. And this is normal. Most Australians die because of or associated result of a chronic disease of some description, and a significant proportion of them have at least one chronic disease. And so and many of these diseases are happening because your body goes into an inflammatory state. It can't rebuild itself properly, and it starts to break down. All of this being said, is that if you can nourish your body so that it can repair itself, then it can stay healthier longer, your brain stays healthier, and you're able to alleviate symptoms of chronic disease, including depression, by taking care of your body and your gut and allowing it to, giving it the nourishment that it needs to repair itself. Now, it's important to make some comment here, and that is to say, there's no one solution that fits for everything, and that's absolutely true. And for the people that are listening to this podcast that are interested in gut-brain connection and gut health as it pertains to mental health, go and see someone, go and see a naturopath, and go and see a functional GP or an integrative GP who understands how these things work together, and get them to help you come up with a treatment plan. It'll involve nutrition. It'll involve exercise. It'll involve socialization, of course. It'll involve sleep. All of these pillars of health are really, really important. But if the person that if you're trying to deal with a mental health condition and the person you're talking to isn't talking about the gut, then find someone who is, because there's definite connections between the two, and a healthy gut is a healthy person.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And how linked would you say it is from what you've seen, the link between mental health and the gut?
Yeah, so there's really, really good research coming out on this stuff. There's two ways to think about it. Number one is inflammation. So low grade chronic inflammation is a state where you're basically, the best way I heard it described was that your immune system it's like the thermostat's broken. And so the thermostat on your heat is broken. The heat stays on all the time. Now your immune system, it's like, man, that's your SWAT team, right? Those guys, your immune system is supposed to respond to a pathogenic invader. It's supposed to deal with it, and it's supposed to eject it, and it's supposed to calm down, right? But these chemicals that are flowing through your body during an inflammatory state, when your immune system is activated, are really powerful. They're designed to kill off viruses and bacteria that are pathogenic, and so they have this it's like they've got a heavy artillery, right? Your immune system is heavy artillery. And so when you cut your hand and there's, some dirt gets in there and it's got some foreign invader pathogens of some description, your immune system responds instantly at a cellular level to start healing that wound, but also to start dealing with those pathogens. And it sends out the Green Berets, right? And they're fully armed and they are attacking those invaders and they are destroying them, right? But if you can imagine that if your body's is damaged on an internal level. So, for example, let's say you've got a leaky gut where your large intestine is leaking into your body cavity, or it's triggering an immune response. If you can't heal that, then you've basically got this immune system, which is incredibly toxic and powerful, is constantly firing into your body. And so all of these chemicals are flowing through your body all the time. And what they're doing is they're deteriorating function. So they start to cause problems in your arteries. That's cardiovascular disease. They start to cause problems in your joints. That's arthritis. They start to cause problems in your brain. So that's things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, but it's also depression. And so they're saying that modern research is saying that especially mental illnesses like depression may be a pro-inflammatory response. And so you can deal with the gut. And if you can tune down the immune system, the immune response by healing the gut, then you can potentially alleviate some of the symptoms of depression. And this is why I was so interested with my dad, because he was heavily medicated for depression. And so the other aspect of it is that many of the neurotransmitters, which are your feel-good hormones, are generated in the gut. And so you've got dopamine and serotonin. When you get these things in your system, you feel better, you feel relaxed, you feel loved, you feel all of these sensations that many people, unfortunately, don't feel very much anymore.
Yeah.
It may be because your gut can't produce them anymore. or your gut's not in the right state to be able to produce those neurotransmitters. And so again, it all comes back to the gut. If you can get your gut healed and get your gut right, then it provides you with a foundation, a platform for healing other aspects of your problems that you might be having, whether those are inflammatory-based diseases, mental illnesses, and or other conditions. So, yeah, the gut-brain connection, it's profound. There's a nerve that runs between the gut and the brain. It's called the vagus nerve. It runs just behind your ear. It actually winds its way all the way through all of your major organs. But the gut sends signals. The gut's lining is like it's like covered in neurons. There's more neurons in the lining of the gut than there are in your spinal cord. So effectively, it's like a brain. It's like a brain tube. Think about your brain as like this sort of like weave of little cells. You know what a brain looks like, right?
Yeah.
So instead of being like woven in like that, it's like a tube, and the inside is covered in neurons. And so the bacteria, when they release their neurotransmitters, they send those signals into the neurons of the gut lining, and those signals then pass straight back up to your brain through your vagus nerve. So it's a profound,
complicated process, yeah.
But it's biology, and this is the way we were designed. I mean, I was listening to a podcast earlier. So the earliest forms of complex life on Earth, the first forms of life were single cell organisms, archaea and bacteria, right? And so for about 3 billion years, these bacteria were floating around these thermal vents in the bottom of the ocean, and they were just minding their own business. And if they got a meal here or there, they were happy. But then eventually some of these bacteria started sticking to each other, and they started getting organized, and they were like, hey, let's hang out. Maybe we can help each other out here. And I'm sort of overplaying it a little bit. I don't want to make a parody, but just to try to simplify the ideas, right? And so they started forming complex shapes. They started as blobs of bacteria, weren't very effective. They just got swept away. And so they're like, well, maybe we could we could be a blob that sticks to a rock, and then we'll just eat whatever flows past us. And then as that blob evolved, and I'm talking about over millions and millions of years, and I apologize if I'm offending any of your creationist listeners, but the fact is that these bacteria started to form complex shapes. And the first sophisticated and complex shape that they formed was a tube. And what they found is that the bacteria would line the inside of this tube, and then debris from the ocean would flow into the tube, and the bacteria would eat the tube, feed on the debris. And they thought, well, this is pretty cool. So what happens if we disconnect from our rock where we've been forming, and we've got a tube that's floating through the ocean? And the bacteria were like, well, this is really cool because we're going to be swept around by the currents, and we'll get access to different resources. Over the next million years, that tube was like, well, what about if we want to control where we go? And so it developed arms, and it started holding onto the rocks, and then the arms started walking in this direction, and they kept bumping into things. And so the tube was like, well, maybe why don't we develop some way of figuring out where we're going? And it's like, well, let's create some eyeballs. And so evolution said, all right, the tubes that have eyeballs and arms become much better at finding resources than those that don't. And they're like, well, to keep genetic diversity, why don't we crossbreed with another tube that has eyeballs and arms? And you can see where I'm going with this. It's like, we're a tube with eyeballs and arms. All right, that's what a human being is. And if the bacteria, if we're nourishing the right types of bacteria that live inside us, then we can be healthier. It all starts from there. And I guess that's the point of my little, I don't know what you call it, detour from the conversation.
I like it. We're getting a bit of
lessons you didn't expect today, Nick.
We're getting some education on evolution here. It's good. I like it. It's interesting. And it is crazy how disconnected we are from all of this, from, we don't think about it. We think, our ego gets in the way. We think, no, we don't like to go into too much detail. We're disconnected from even how we get our food and how that comes about. It's just like, okay, now it's just there, I can push a button on my phone and have food come to me and all these different things. And I think the key point, as you're saying, is just being preventative, doing some simple things.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, mental health, a lot of the time there might be an underlying problem where, you need some proper psychotherapy, you need to, break down whatever it is. But before you even fully explore that, look at like what you're talking about. Okay. What is my gut health like? What's my nutrition like?
Yeah.
Am I sleeping enough? Am I exercising?
Yep.
Am I doing all these things? Often, if you go and change those different things, you might find, hey, the problems not really there anymore. It was coming from all of these things. Or you'll have the capacity to actually go and address the problem properly, but we don't get to that point because we just fall in this vicious cycle. So it's just, the preventative thing, I think, is the key thing. Don't wait to like have these health problems. Do something while you're feeling good. Try and improve yourself. Have that
Yeah.
have that mindset. We can, make life so much more productive.
Yeah. Yeah. And then without wanting to get into too much of a philosophical discussion about it, maybe we should. But I think what's really profound is to understand the things that matter to human beings, really on a most basic level. And you hear about, you see these things on the internet all the time. It's like, oh, I was a nurse in an aged care facility, and in the last weeks of their lives, the people always reflected on their lives and said they wish they'd spent more time with people. They wish they'd spent more time healthy. And it's like we get wrapped up in consumerism. We get wrapped up in our careers and accumulating wealth and all these things. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the key, but what I'm trying to encourage, at least for my kids, is to try to figure out what actually matters to you. And I think what we'll find is that when it all boils down to it, what matters is community, what matters is health, what matters is connection with other human beings. And when you prioritize these things over career, over consumerism, over consumption, over wealth creation, all that sorts of things, which really just take up a lot of time and energy, and they really take you away from the things that are ultimately going to make you really happy and give you a life meaning. Then it's a different way of thinking about what is a human being, and why am I here, and what are the things that matter to me. And I think if for me personally, it's really changed my perspective, is to be healthier, to think more about health and wellness, to try to, like I say, create wellness in my community, and to prioritize that over other things is a shift that I'm making proactively within my own life.
Are you interested in joining a community of like-minded people who are on the same journey as you are? Even though you're the one that needs to do the work, you don't have to go it alone. You can find all of the information at nickbracks.start.page. I love that, mate. And yeah, exactly. Like you're saying, hopefully we can make that decision sooner than later, because it's it's really illogical when you think about it, like what you're talking about there, that, okay, let's, focus on making money, career, capitalism, consumerism, all these different things at the expense of our actual physical and mental health. And maybe in the future, when we get there, if we've got the resource and we can take a step back, we might address that. But probably by that point, it's too late. We've built up, brain patterns, behavior patterns, where even if we have the time and resource, we're so, it's so consolidated, all these patterns we've built, it's going to be very hard to break it. But if we can reverse it and think, okay, who do I actually want to be? How do I want to, let's have these same goals, but let's do it from a place of looking after ourselves and putting our health first. And I don't think any goal in the world is worth the expense of our health. So if it's getting in the way of that, then you got to reevaluate.
That's right. And I think the other thing that's important to recognize is that there's a cumulative effect for healthy habits. And it starts. Well, I'm assuming you're in your 30s, maybe 40s. I don't. If you get into these healthy habits now, it's the things that you do every day.
Yep.
The little things you do every day are the things that are going to have the most profound long-term benefit for you. And it's a little bit of exercise. It's watching what you eat a little bit, making sure you get enough fiber, obviously, good sleep habits, all that sort of stuff. The benefits start to accumulate. It's like compounding interest, right? I mean, if you start investing you start investing young, all of the investments you made when you're young are worth a huge amount when you're old. It's the same idea. And you don't have to, it's not about every day I've got to run 10Ks and I've got to, eat 50 different plants and, do a cold plunge and all that sort of stuff. You just got to do what's sustainable for you. And I think the key for, the thing that I've realized is that I can't do all of those things every day. But there's things I can do every day which will make a small difference. And if you think about how long it takes you to get to age 60, which I'm not far off, it's like, well, the earlier you start with these little healthy habits, just one or two things a day that are going to help promote your health long term, the benefit will be profound as you start to age. And what you'll notice is that is that your peers are aging much worse than you are. They're not nearly as healthy as you are. They're on multiple medications per day. They can't climb a set of stairs without losing breath. All of these things, because they should start as soon as they realize that they need to do these things. You should start doing them.
Yeah.
But the earlier you can do that in your life, the more profound the benefit's going to be in the long term. And it's just like investing in super health insurance, whatever it may be. It's like the earlier you start, the better off you are.
100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more, mate. There's no perfect time to start, and exactly like you said, just doing, the small steps. Don't get everything perfect, just one small thing every day, even, it all adds up. But we often are all or nothing, and we think, okay, I've got this lofty goal, I might try it, I go all in for 2 weeks, okay, this is too hard, I'm overwhelmed now, I can't sustain it, I give up. But
That's
just do
it.
little things, it's not
That's right.
that complicated, it doesn't have to be so hard.
I know. The best way to think about it is to do so little that you think there's no point in doing it.
Exactly.
But
I
do
love
it
that.
every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the
Exactly.
key. It's like, if you want to learn how to do 100 push-ups, it might take 5 years to get to 100 push-ups. But if you do an extra one push-up, like you start with one push-up a day, and you do that for 2 weeks, and then after 2 weeks you do 2 push-ups a day, and it's like, this is so easy. Why am I
Yeah.
even bothering? But if you do that for a few years, then all of a sudden you're going to be at 100 push-ups, and you'll be much better for it. And I think that's the key, is to do these things so gradually that you think there's no point. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that's not going to give me any benefit. But it really does. And it really gives you a profound benefit. You build on what you've done, you build over time, and the results will be there. And I think that's because like you say, I mean, people are like, oh, I'm going to go, I'll run 10Ks this weekend. I haven't run for a couple of years, but it'll be fine. You get injured, and all of a sudden it's like you can't do anything.
No,
Because you're
exactly.
injured. Because you asked your body to do something it couldn't do.
And it
But if you say,
becomes this
I'm going to go
painful
for a
thing. Yeah.
200-meter run this weekend, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's going to take me longer to put my runners on than it is that I'm going to be running.
Yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah.
but that's just every day or every other day, you just keep doing little things and building up over time. We're alive for a long time, right? I mean, and you want to be healthy for as long as you can. So people think there's got to be a short-term fix, and it's just not. There's not a short-term fix to anything.
No, exactly.
All the fixes are long-term, but they're gradual. And so they're really, really manageable. They're really small. They're really gradual. And just do little things, and over time, the benefits will start to reveal themselves.
And it applies to everything in life. If you're running a business, a lot of the time the tendency might be, I'm excited, I'm running off dopamine, it's new, whatever. You go all in, that wears off, and then you miss all these, important things, and it falls apart. But if you can be like, no, this is a long-term journey. I'm going to do one little thing every day. I'm going to build a foundation. It'll add up. So it really applies to everything. Relationships, same thing, whatever it is.
Absolutely. No, it's funny you should mention that, because of course, I've got my little SuperGut Australia business here, and I'm like, when's we're going to hit the big time and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I went to a conference in Sydney last year, and I talked to some of the guys who are running these big booths. They were independent, and they're running these big booths. And I was like, how long have you guys been in business? They're like, 10 years.
Wow.
I'm like, on average, it was like 10 years they've been doing it, and they're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you look at most of the shelf, if you walk through Woolies, the products that weren't on the shelf last week that are on the shelf today, they won't be in a month's time.
Yep.
It's the products that you see every week. They've been in the market for 10 years, and they've been doing, and it's a slow and steady business. And, they just take it really, really slowly. They develop the foundation of their service offering. Consumers get used to using the products, and they like them, and it takes time. You just got to,
which isn't what people want to hear, because we're all wanting to know, how do I become, get rich quick, and how do I get this? And that sounds boring to people. It's like, well, I don't want to do it then, but it's like, that's how you have to do it. And, I've pursued acting for quite a long time, and the same with that. The one bit of, and I've done it on and off, but the one thing that stuck in my head, and that I've heard everyone who's had success in it, is really one piece of advice: just don't quit. And I've been doing it now for about 8 years. The amount of really talented people I've known that have worked and that have now quit is through the roof, because people just get frustrated and disenchanted, where I've got the outlook of, well, I'm building my business while I do it, I'm sustaining myself, and maybe it'll take me till I'm 60 to get a significant role in something, and that might kick things off. Maybe it'll never happen, but who cares? If I stay at it, I've got a pretty high chance that something will happen. But if I quit, then you've got no chance.
I think it's really interesting you say that, Nick, because the way I see it with actors, it's like acting. It's a craft, right? It's a form. It's an art form. And if you look
Exactly.
at you look at musicians, right? And you think, okay, well, some bands make it really big when they're really young, but that's almost the worst thing that can happen to you. And so the thing about acting is, in order to, you don't want to be the next big thing for 2 years, because there's nothing worse. I mean, maybe you make it big and maybe you're able to save a bunch of money and maybe you get a lot of roles and all that sort of stuff. But then when you're not relevant anymore because you were popular for a short period of time and everybody knew you, and then the worst thing that can happen is that you're getting on the subway and everyone looks over and they're like, "Oh, that guy, I recognize him. He was huge 5 years ago. Where's he been?"
Yeah.
What you want is you want a career, right? Where you want to be able to do acting work forever.
Yeah.
And that takes patience and that takes development of character. You've got to develop your own personal character. You've got to have some substance to you, so that when you go in for these auditions, it's like when you see a singer who can just all they can do is hit the notes. And you're like, where's the soul of this person? I want to hear the person. I want to hear the
Exactly.
singer. And if you're an actor, it's like, I want to see the person. Who is the person? What have they experienced? How have they lived? What's their journey been? And it comes through in the craft. And
Yeah.
that's why AI is never going to be able to replace that. It's because we're attracted to people and
Yeah.
people with character and people of substance and people who've had a journey. And it takes a long time to build up that kind of character. And then that comes through in the craft. Right. So
Exactly.
that's why you don't quit, is because you're still building the person that becomes the performer, that becomes the actor that people can relate to. And it's not because of the role that you've had, it's because of the way you portray that role, because you've got real experience, you've got lived experience.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at Nick Brax. I really appreciate your ongoing support.
And you can tell when people are faking it. You can tell when they're faking it when they're singing. You can tell when they're faking it when they're acting. It's because they don't have the lived experience. There's no authenticity to them. And so you have to build that authenticity, and that takes time. That
You
takes
can't rush that.
experience. You
Yeah.
can't rush it.
I love it,
You
mate.
can't
We
rush
need.
it,
I
and you
think
can't fake it.
you could run workshops for actors. What you're talking about is so relevant, and people need to hear that, because it's we're going off topic here, but it's so true. And you can't. And I think again, it applies to everything in life, but it's just live your life. If you go and have, you were telling me how you lived in the US, you did this, you started a company, you're doing this now. Go and live your life. Every experience is going to lead to the next thing, and you're going to have that character to draw on and
Yeah,
whatever else. If it's only focusing on the end goal, you're going to miss living life, and living life is actually the key to being able to execute the things you want. So we get it all the wrong way. And
we do.
final part of that from again, going off topic, but I know our listeners benefit from all the stuff we're talking about here. I had that experience where when I was in my early 20s, I was lost. I had a very short, this is a very small level, but a very short period where I was on reality shows in Australia and was getting attention, and I'd go to nightclubs and I could, get, a booth and have women coming over and do whatever I wanted. And it was at a point where, to me, that seemed like, oh, I want more of this. And I kept chasing that at the expense of actually learning anything about hard work, about developing character, about what I actually wanted. And I'm so grateful I went through that and came out the other end and had to now find a new path, because it taught me exactly what you said. If you could get success overnight, it would be horrible, because you're not going to, even if you could sustain it, you're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to, value it. You're not going to be a good person
Yeah,
a lot of the time, most of the time. We need to have these experiences. And it's, again, like our listeners, this is one of the big things. We've got a predominantly male audience, and a lot of them are feeling so stuck because they don't know how to make that transition. They're wanting to, but they've got this life they want to live. They're stuck in a life they're not satisfied with, and they don't know how to bridge that gap. And I think it's a very common problem in this,
yeah,
day and age.
yeah. No, I think it is, and And it really is a trap. And it's great that you're building an audience amongst men, and especially if you've got young men who are really a bit lost, because there's so many mixed messages coming out to men these days, and it's something I care very deeply about as well. And I think the key is to try and figure out what it is that you can do that makes you happy and is meaningful to you. So, for example, I've never done anything in my career, which is now, coming up on 35 years or however long I've been working, it doesn't matter. I've never done anything that's given me as much personal satisfaction as helping to create a product that when I talk to somebody who takes our product, they say, I've never had anything that gave me this type of benefit before. And man, honestly, that is all the juice I need. It's
Yeah.
everything that I need to get me out of bed in the morning and to keep doing this, is to say, there's people in their 70s who've had disrupted bowel function for 30 years, and they can't take any more Metamucil, and they can't take any more Benefiber, because it's full of chemicals and flavors, and they just don't want to use it anymore. And they get hold of my SuperGut Everyday Fiber product for SuperGut Australia, and they try it, and they're like, I've never had anything that's normalized my bowel function as effectively as this product has. And
Mm.
it's like, that's profound. Now I'm very lucky, but it's taken 5 years for me to get to this point after developing the product and doing all the marketing and all that sort of stuff. And it hasn't been nearly as popular as I'd hoped it would be. But when I look at the feedback that we get, and it's like, it's doing exactly what I need it to do. And that is to say, people are trying the product. Most of them buy it again once they've had it. And it's like, to me, that's like, I'm not making any money. I mean, it's costing me money, right? I mean, it's just, we're on a get poor slowly strategy, Nick. We're trying to get poor as slowly as we possibly can. But the point is that the product is really, really good. And I'm finding it really, really important. So I think the key is that if don't be distracted by what everybody else thinks that you should be doing. Do things that are meaningful to you and that give you satisfaction. And if that's taking a dog for a walk, or if it's helping going visit a nursing home and having a chat to an old fella who just wants someone to talk to because he's really lonely, and it's going to give you a sense of satisfaction about human connection at the end of it, go do that. And no one's paying you to do it. It's like making money is like a real distraction, I think. It's like everyone chasing this idea that in order to be validated, in order to have substance, in order to be a person of character, I have to have achieved certain milestones. And I think this is especially true in the US, unfortunately, where, it's like, if I'm going to be attractive to women, I have to have achieved the following 17 things by the time I'm 25. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
People like authenticity. They like genuineness. They like kindness. They like funny. They like helpful. They like thoughtful. At the end of the day, if you're none of those things, but you've ticked off this list, you're still not going to be a whole person. Just develop the character of the person. Act with kindness. Be good to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be as healthy as you can. Do little things every day, and that's how you build a good life, I think.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, mate. Amazing advice there, and I think great way to sort of wrap things up. But I think anyone listening, do that. If you're feeling stuck, just think of, simplify it. Forget everything. What's something I enjoy? Not for any reward, not for any amount of money. Just go do something, and that will probably lead to the next thing. And before you know it, you'll be on a path where you found this passion and you're doing something that you truly care about, like what you're
It's
doing with this
meaningful. That's
business.
right.
But you've got to take that step. You've got to. For me, it was falling into the public speaking and sharing my story and getting asked to do talks. And I did, hundreds of them for free, and then started getting paid for it. And it turned into this career that I would have never imagined. But that only came from doing the talks and just hearing one person go and actually get help from hearing a message I said. And like you're talking about there, with your business and being able to actually change someone's life in some way, there's no better feeling. No amount of achievement or anything else beats that feeling of feeling like I've made some contribution. I've helped someone
Yeah.
in some small way make this change
Yeah.
in their life. We're fortunate if we can do that, and it brings you joy. And I think we need more of that in the world. We need to think on that level. So love what you're
Yeah.
talking about, mate. Where can our listeners go? We'll put this in the show notes, but where can they go if they want to learn more about your product and check it out, etc.? Where can we send them?
Yeah. So it's SuperGut Australia. There's more than one SuperGut in the world. Ours is supergutaustralia.com.au. is our URL. You can learn more about our products, how we came about formulating them, understanding what their benefits are, and I'll share a discount code with you if you'd like to share that with your listeners as well. We'll pop that in the show notes.
Amazing.
I'm very happy. There is some issues shipping to some countries, so that'll be of main use to some of your local listeners. But yeah, I'm thrilled to. It's really nice to meet you, Nick, because obviously, I lived in Melbourne during your dad's premiership, and I know that it was a tumultuous time for you there for a bit, and it's really nice to see how you've grown through that experience, and you're trying to, turn that into something really beneficial for the community. So good for you, mate, and kudos. And I think that's terrific, and it's been really nice chatting with you. I'm really glad we got to have this chat.
Appreciate it, mate. Really do appreciate that, and appreciate the discount code. And we'll, for everyone listening, we'll have the link to the website, and we'll put the information in the show notes. So make sure to check it out. And final thing, mate, we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. So we've gone a bit over time. These can be super quick answers, just whatever comes to mind for you.
Okay.
So the first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind?
My family used to holiday down at the Gippsland Lakes, and my dad, when I was very young, built a 16-foot trailer sailor, which actually is sitting in my driveway now. And we used to sail together as a family, and that's just profound memories for me. Joy, just absolute joy of sailing a small boat.
Love it. What do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Well, I think it's there's definitely a health component to mental health, and I think that's really one of the things that we really need to try to understand. And I'm going to go on to this in a second, but the problem we've got is we've got people who treat mental health illnesses in one silo, and we've got people who treat cardiovascular disease in another silo, and Alzheimer's in another silo, and arthritis in another silo. We need to start thinking across the silos, and it comes down to nutrition and health and well-being. So,
yeah,
for all of these diseases, there's a nutritional component to it. I believe it starts in the gut, and so I think we need to shift the focus away from the specific type of disease and more towards the human being as a healthy entity.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Comes back to the prevention and just looking after all these key areas. I think that's right. Super important. What would you say is your personal definition of happiness?
Well, I think listening to what I've been talking, it's probably pretty obvious.
Yep.
But for me, I've found profound happiness in seeing a problem and trying to figure out how to solve it, and then doing something about it. And it's taken much longer than I thought it would, and it's cost me more money than I thought it would, and all those sorts of things. But there's nothing I'd rather be doing on a daily basis than trying to figure out how to help people be healthier. It gives me a huge amount of satisfaction. I love it. I mean, hanging out with the wife and kids too, of course. Got to say that.
Yeah.
But of course that's true. But just on a deep personal level, the idea that we've got a product that's helping people is really amazing.
I love it. What if you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self? What would that be?
I think it would be embrace discomfort. So the idea of stepping outside my comfort zone, I stayed really, really close to inside my comfort zone when I was younger. And it took me a long time actually living in the States and then coming back and starting a business to realize that it's like, actually, I can cope really nicely outside my comfort zone. I'm playing the guitar now and singing badly. And it's just like, it's just all about embracing this idea that to get better at something that you care about, you have to be bad at it, and you have to be continuously bad at it. But for every step that you're bad, you're getting better than you were. And so when I look at, if you keep stepping outside your comfort zone and trying to get better at stuff, you'll always, the next step will always be uncomfortable, because if I'm trying to do something I've never done before, I'm going to be bad at this, but I'm good at everything else I was bad at before. I'm now good at. I'm just going to be bad at this now, but tomorrow I'll be good at that. And so it's always, it's the willingness to continue to step outside and to continue to try to strive for, so being okay with the idea of not being good at something. embrace the idea that you're not good at something.
Yeah, everyone had to start somewhere. Anyone we look at who is the top of a field, they at one point didn't know what they were doing. So, it's
Absolutely.
like, yeah, important thing to remember. So,
Absolutely.
final one here. What are you most proud of?
Look, I think I'm most proud of I guess my personal evolution, my journey. It's a bit of cheesy, but how I'm proud of how I've been able to do things that I didn't think I was able to do, that maybe other people weren't prepared to do. But I took a bit of a leap of faith, and I said, I'm going to try and be better at something. I'm going to try and make a difference here, and it just makes you a more substantial person over time.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. And so I think the key is to get used to the idea that building a proper human being with character and integrity and a good social network, these things just take time, and you have to be patient.
Yeah.
And you have to be prepared to say, I'm committed to this journey, and I'm going to do a little bit every day to try and make my life better, more meaningful, with more integrity, better relationships, better health, all those sorts of things. Like I said before, it's the things you do every day that you think there's no point in doing this. It's not going to do me any good at all. It takes years to start doing good, but it does. It really does. And I think that's probably one thing I'd like to emphasize to anyone who's 30 years younger than me, which is most of your listeners probably. It's like this idea that you do something small every day that even feels so meaningless that you're like, what's the bloody point? Just do it anyway, and then do it again the next day and the next day and the next day, and you get this cumulative benefit, and your life changes for the better in a certain direction over time.
Great way to finish, mate. And it really summarizes a lot of what you talked about there. And, reminding yourself life's long. And we have this idea that, if we're not a millionaire by 30, or we don't have this or that by this age, life's going to be a disaster. And it's not how it works. We remove all time frames, do one little thing every day, and there's no end to it. So it's a really good attitude to have. And yeah, appreciate everything you've shared, mate. I think we could have probably talked for another 2 hours with all the stuff you're talking about here, but appreciate the time, and we might have to do round 2. So thank you.
I'd love to. Yeah, it's been great to meet you, mate.
Thank you, David Robertson, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to just leave a comment or send me a DM. Your feedback's always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.